Yo, what's up everybody? My name is Riley Newton and today we have another video for this Daniel series. This is the last video that we're going to be in for this series. It's crazy that it's already been 4 weeks of doing this video series. I hope that it has been something that you've enjoyed, something that you've learned from, something that has been good for your soul. So that being said, let's jump into the video. In the midst of self-isolation, a lot of us have turned to streaming TV shows and movies to keep us entertained for a while. Whether it's Netflix or whether it's Hulu, whether it's Disney Plus, whatever streaming service that you pick, there's all sorts of ways that we can do this. But today we're going to be talking about a story that tops anything that you could ever watch in any of those movies or TV shows. We're going to be finishing up our Daniel series in chapter 7. Daniel is divided into two clear sections, and I'll show you more in detail what these sections look like in a moment. But Daniel 1 through 6 is where we've been for the last 3 weeks, and these chapters tell the story of Daniel and his friends. And then where we pick up today starts this new section, a second half, which is a type of literature known as apocalyptic. The word apocalyptic comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which means unveiling. Now, when you hear me say the word apocalypse during a global pandemic, you might be thinking, oh no, what has this guy gotten us into? But I have to tell you, it's not that kind of video. The passage that we're going to study is a complex and easily misunderstood passage, and I'm not sure that we can even scratch the surface of all the deep meaning and things within it in the next 10 or 15 minutes. But what I do want to share with you is what I sense that we should be learning from it today. So let's read it together. All right, we're going to be reading Daniel 7, 1 through 14, and this is what it says. Earlier during the first year of King Belshazzar's reign in Babylon, Daniel had a dream and saw visions as he lay in his bed. He wrote down the dream, and this is what he saw. In my vision that night, I, Daniel, saw a great storm churning the surface of a great sea, with strong winds blowing from every direction. Then 4 huge beasts came up out of the water, each different from the others. The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings. As I watched, its wings were pulled off, and it was left standing with its 2 hind feet on the ground like a human being, and it was given a human mind. Then I saw the second beast, and it looked like a bear. It was rearing up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And I heard a voice saying to it, "Get up, devour the flesh of many people." Then the third of these strange beasts appeared, and it looked like a leopard. It had 4 birds' wings on its back, and it had 4 heads. Great authority was given to this beast. Then in my vision that night I saw a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, and very strong. It devoured and crushed its victims with huge iron teeth and trampled their remains beneath its feet. It was different from any of the other beasts, and it had 10 horns. And as I was looking at the horns, suddenly another small horn appeared among them. 3 of the first horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. This little horn had eyes like human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. I watched as thrones were put in place, and the Ancient One sat down to judge. His clothing was as white as snow, his hair like the purest wool. He sat on a fiery throne with wheels of blazing fire, and a river of fire was pouring out, flowing from his presence. Millions of angels ministered to him, many millions stood to attend him. Then the court began its session, and the books were opened. I continued to watch because I could hear the little horn's boastful speech. I kept watching until the 4th beast was killed and its body was destroyed by fire. The other 3 beasts and their authority taken from them, but they were allowed to live a while longer. As my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. He was given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that the people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal, and it will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. Whew. Some of you are thinking, man, this is about to be interesting. And yeah, you're right. It's going to be very interesting as we break down this passage. All right, first, do you see the break in what happens in this passage? Verse 1 indicates to us that something has shifted. Daniel, the interpreter of dreams, is now the one who is receiving the visions. The writer is letting us know that we shifted gears in this story. Daniel has this vision during the first year of King Belshazzar's reign, and we know historically that places this story around 553 BC. Then we have the four beasts, and they represent historically four earthly kingdoms and eras in human history. In chapter 7, verse 4, we see a lion with eagle's wings. And this represents the entire Babylonian Empire, the one that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. The present one as Daniel writes his story. Babylon was what we now know as around present-day Iraq, and it's interesting that the lion with eagle wings is still a prominent symbol in Iraq. Chapter 7, verse 5 is the second beast. It's a bear with three ribs that symbolize that it's devoured three animals. And what's interesting is that the Babylon Empire was made up of three provinces and was taken up by the Persians, what we know as around present-day Iran. In chapter 7, verse 6, the third empire, the third beast, is like a leopard with wings. A leopard is fast, but a leopard with wings moves like me when Taco Bell announces that they have nacho fries again. It's supercharged. It's Roadrunner fast. This represents the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great. And this empire spread very, very quickly. And the beast has four heads, and there's four generals that followed behind Alexander. And in chapter 7, verses 7 and 8, the fourth beast is very different from the others, and it represents historically the Roman Empire. Now, you probably didn't want a history lesson, but let's face it, you could use it after being out of school for what seems like 3 years now, right? And hey, at school, I bet you've never gotten a history lesson with like all of these Godzilla-level monsters. But these creatures, they're horrific, and nightmares normally end in terror. However, in Daniel's vision, hope is the final truth. His attention is drawn to God, whose purity, whose awesomeness, whose might is symbolized by his white robes, his white hair, and his flaming throne, which, by the way, I think we've done a disservice about how we've described God in the church for a while, because God in this passage sounds like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, except for like way cooler. And Gandalf is already pretty awesome, right? But for all that can't be understood in these verses, what we know happens is this: evil meets its match. This last great beast, this threat to the people of God, is put to death. All the other beasts were stripped of their authority, but they were allowed to live. Iran, Iraq, Greece are all present-day countries. Rome is a city inside of a country with no reach like it once did. And in the midst of all of these great empires, we see this picture that God is still sovereign. He's still in control. And we get an even better picture of this in verses 13 and 14. Let's look at it real quick. As my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. He was given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that the people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal, and it will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. One was coming like the Son of Man. Do you remember anyone using that title anywhere else in the Bible? Well, if not, spoiler alert, Jesus does. This is a phrase used to describe Jesus around 81 times in 4 Gospels. Daniel, in this passage in the Old Testament, 500 years before Jesus is ever even on the earth, Daniel has a vision of Jesus. Consider the circumstance. Daniel is a Jew who's living in Babylon. He survived king after king after king, and at this point, Daniel's probably in his 70s. He sees his people in turmoil. Things are not as they have been or how they're supposed to be. And Daniel and the people of God are in the midst of this long, dark night of the soul. Not like Batman, but a dark night of the soul. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Do you know what it means? This idea of the dark night of the soul is that when everything is lost, it all seems darkness, that there's no hope left, that then comes the new life and all that is needed to glean from that circumstance. But in this long, dark night of the soul, Daniel is given a vision, and he has to come to terms with the fact that things might very well get worse before they get better, that the difficulty of the things that he's facing is not yet over, that this long night has not yet passed. Daniel may not see circumstances any better than right now because he's an old man and he might not have much more life to live. But one is coming who will be given authority, honor, sovereignty, and rule over all of these nations, all of these kingdoms, all of these beasts will be defeated. Look, this couldn't be more perfect timing in the church calendar. We celebrated this truth just a few days ago on Easter Sunday, if you're watching this for OSM this Wednesday. We celebrated that our God has always been present in the darkest of circumstances. That even when he was crucified on a cross, when all hope was lost, in the darkest night that the world has ever seen, death could not hold him back from his mission to save you and to save me. In fact, we have hope beyond hope because Jesus was able to conquer the grave and deliver us in our most dire circumstances in our long, dark night of the soul. You see, Daniel is in the middle of a dark night. He's in the middle of these tough circumstances. Things are not like they're supposed to be, but it won't always be this way for Daniel. And this vision that he has in this passage symbolizes that. One is coming on the clouds who will put things right. One is coming who will bring order to the disorder. One is coming who defeats the chaos. One is coming who trumps the evil. One is coming to be present in the middle of this dark night of the soul. And in light of what is going to happen, Daniel is to live differently in his circumstances right where he is. In light of who is coming, Daniel and the people of God are called to live differently, even in the midst of their dark night of the soul in Babylon. And what's interesting is that their circumstance in Babylon isn't that too different than what we're facing right now because of the coronavirus or whatever other unknown that you're facing in your life. But here's the truth that we get from this text. We don't only have a hope that one day things are going to be restored into right order eventually once we get to heaven, but we have a call to live differently than those around us right now to bring restoration to all of these dark and hurting and desolate places through our lives. So as we close, I want to ask you a couple questions of what it might look like when we begin to get this idea for real. What if we begin to help bring resurrection to all the people around us who desperately need it? What if we begin to use every single part of our lives, our money, our social media accounts, our time, our friends, to begin to leverage a relationship with Jesus in our lives? What does it look like if we start to be generous with all of those things? What does it look like to, instead of using that time for our own gain or for what we want to do, what does it look like to begin to invest in other people and show them what Jesus is doing in our lives? What does it look like to be generous with our resources that we've been blessed with for people who are struggling in this time? What does it look like to begin to give hope to people who have anxiety or people who are depressed or people who are alone because they're in self-isolation during this time? What does it look like to begin to use this as a time to really hone in on our relationship with God and tune out all the other voices and grow deeper in a relationship with Him, tune our hearts to His and hear what He's saying to us, because we have so much opportunity to use this moment in our lives to develop that relationship with Him. We have so much time in a way that we never really have before. So what does it look like for us to start to actually begin to live like that? What if, like Daniel, we stand firm in Christ because He is the King whose reign will never end? Instead of living our lives in a rat race, let's remember that there's a hope that Jesus came and there's a hope that He is going to return again. If there's any questions that you have, please comment down below, like the video, share it, whatever you want to do. Reach out to us on Instagram if you have any questions or if you want to link up with us at all. If you feel like you're alone, you're fighting these battles by yourself, you're not. We're here for you, the staff at the Orchard Tupelo, me, Emily, John at OSM and Kickstart. We would love to talk to you, schedule a Zoom call, FaceTime, whatever it is, because we're here for you. We want what's best for you. Please let us know. We love you so much, and we'll see you next week.